So in Kingdom Hearts 3, we saw the return of my favorite trio in all of Kingdom Hearts, and that is of course Roxas, Axel, and Xion, or the Seesaw Trio. But we also know from the Limit Cut episode that a whole year passed between Sora's disappearance and the beginning of the Limit Cut episode. So we know that the Wayfinder trio went to the Realm of Darkness, and we already know what happened with the research crew in Radiant Garden as they were studying Kairi's memories the whole time. But the one thing we have yet to see is what happened in that year with the Seesaw trio. We know that they were studying Roxas's and Xion's memories that whole time, and I think we can pretty safely assume that that means Naminé was assisting them with the search because she's back. But one thing we might get to see as we continue into phase 2 of the Kingdom Hearts series might actually be another game that puts more of a spotlight on our resident Twilight Town trio, and Isa. So for those of you like me who particularly enjoyed the Seesaw trio, I gotta say their case is definitely an interesting one. Because you have the Wayfinder trio who has their own game, which is of course Birth by Sleep, which in my opinion is one of the better games in the series. Then you have the Destiny trio in Sora, Kairi, and Riku that spans across multiple games including the number titles, alongside the Disney trio of Mickey, Donald, and Goofy. But when you get to the Seesaw trio, their main game is just Days. And you could argue that it's also a part of Kingdom Hearts 2 with Roxas and Axel's story, but I'm just gonna go with Days because it's not the Seesaw trio without Xion. I think we can all agree on that. And while Days isn't necessarily a bad game, depending on how you look at it, I honestly believe that out of all the games in the Kingdom Hearts franchise, it's probably a double-edged sword, more so than any other game. Because on one hand, you have a great story that fleshes out characters that we met in Kingdom Hearts 2 like Axel and Roxas, and then introduces Xion and does a great job of working her into the story as well. 358 over 2 Days had such a great cast of characters as well as an interesting concept, playing as an organization member and basically getting a look behind the curtain into the organization, not as antagonists but as people. But on the other hand, the gameplay itself is tedious and monotonous as you go through it. And while I understand that there is a purpose and it fits into the narrative of the game very well, that doesn't really change the fact that the gameplay for Days, while not bad, leaves a lot to be desired. So the Seesaw trio conundrum is that they're a fantastic group with an amazing story that just happens to be trapped in a mediocre, and some might even call it bad, game, which is honestly just really disappointing. And then even though you have the cutscene movie in the Kingdom Hearts collection, it's not necessarily the full experience of Days. Because yes, you get the basic premise of the game and you'll understand the story, but in that convenience you miss out on what makes the Days trio great. You miss out on the iconic cutscene of Xion saying, "Roxas, that's a stick," or scenes where Axel tells Roxas about girls and how not to push the wrong buttons. You essentially miss a full game's worth of watching them grow from strangers to friends and having all of that ripped away. And personally, that in itself is almost as tragic as the fate they met in the game. And then in Kingdom Hearts 3, where we get to see the group reunited, it was one of the most moving scenes in the entirety of Kingdom Hearts 3. I remember when I first saw that scene with the three of them hugging, I legitimately had to put down the controller for a second and process what just happened. And then seeing them at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3 was amazing because after everything they went to, they finally got to hang out at the beach with each other and just chill. And then Sora had to ruin everything. And honestly, with the series heading where it is now, I think we could see more of the Days trio. Because it's likely we're gonna see more of what happened in the year between the end of Kingdom Hearts 3 and the Limit Cut episode. And with Roxas and Xion finally being in their own bodies, I think having new character arcs for the two of them in phase 2 is definitely in the realm of possibility. I made a video about a subject like this recently where I talked about Aqua's possible character arc going forward. And honestly, I might have to make a separate analysis video on Roxas, so if you want to see that, leave a like and let me know down below in the comments. But personally, I think a game with the Seesaw trio would not only be a great way to flesh out these characters a bit more, but also sort of breathe new life into their characters to see what Roxas and Xion end up becoming now that they're their own people. And I know that they're still connected to Sora just like everyone in the game is, but going from two people who are basically trapped inside Sora's heart, essentially having to surrender their free will to complete Sora, to being their own people and making their own choices completely independent of Sora would definitely be an interesting route to explore. And honestly, I think a game sort of exploring more of their characters and how they react and existing for themselves after being within Sora for so long could definitely be something that makes for some interesting character arcs in the future. And even aside from the potential of Roxas and Xion's character development, there's still a storyline we need to explore more about, like Subject X. And since Sykes, or more appropriately Isa, is now a somebody and seems to be back on the side of light while rocking a stylish new outfit I might add, it could be possible that him and Axel get a game that sort of follows the storyline and continues on that thread that started in Kingdom Hearts 3 and to some extent Birth by Sleep. There are still a lot of plot points that need to be tied up in following their search for Subject X, since we never really got to expand on that in Kingdom Hearts 3 or in Remake. And if I'm being honest, Sykes has never really been one to shy away from a fight, so it's very possible we might just see him use either the somebody version of his claymore or get him a keyblade like Axel did in Dream Drop Distance. There's that, but we could also see Xion get a new keyblade as well. Since she was essentially a replica of Roxas throughout most of Days, she of course copied his keyblade. And while her version of the Kingdom Key could just be the weapon she uses from now on, I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up with a new weapon in the future games as well. Now, all that to say, those are just a couple of things because honestly there's a lot of potential in the Days trio. With the fate they met in Days to now, their story is definitely one of the ones that captivated me the most and makes me want to keep an eye on them for the future of the series. And with where they are now, they have a couple of stories that they could build upon going forward and some character development that could still be shown between Roxas, Axel, Xion, and even Isa. And of course, there is always a possibility that what we see of them could just be shown through cutscenes, but I think there are definitely plenty of plot points and plenty of material that are tied to those characters, potentially enough to end up in a game all by itself. And honestly, after Days, I think the Seesaw Gang needs another game to make up for it. But in any case, I for one can't wait to see what happens with Roxas, Axel, and Xion going forward. But enough about me, what do you guys think? Do you think that the Seesaw Gang could get their own game going forward in the series, or do you think we'll just get it in cutscenes? Let me know down below. And if you want to see more Kingdom Hearts content and become a Guardian of Twilight, make sure you subscribe to the channel and join the community Discord. But that's going to be all from me today, so this is Moose Wayne, signing off.